So every great manager knows that they must create clear expectations for their people if they want great accountability. And so what I'm going to offer you today is a formula for creating agreements versus expectations. Sometimes we think of expectations as a one-way street, that I expect this of you, so you better give it to me. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do a two-way street, or a two-way expectation, which we call agreements. So this is how you would enter into an agreement with your employee or your direct report instead of just that one-way expectation. The first step is you definitely need to make a request. Something like, hey Joe, I need you to ship this Slinky to Mr. Jones by 2 o'clock today. And we run around doing requests all of the time. The problem is that most of us will make the request and then we just drop the Slinky on Joe's desk and we run away thinking we are an awesome manager because we made a very clear request. So in this step of making a request, you definitely ask the question, will you do this? But then let me tell you what you're going to get out of Joe. Most of the time, you get a sure. Sure, boss. Or we like to call it the corporate head nod. Yep, I got it. And most of the time, we run away from that agreement or that expectation thinking that Joe really does have it. He's really going to comply with our request, fulfill our request. But this is what's going through Joe's mind, not much. We are actually trained when our superiors or somebody in authority over us, we're trained to just say yes. We're trained that way in school, we're trained that way in church, we're trained that way at home. But yet somehow when we get out into the workplace, we are expected to collaborate. So this is actually a way that you're teaching your employees how to collaborate and create an agreement with you versus just saying yes. So you're going to make a request, and then Joe, your Joe, is definitely expect this. He's going to say sure. But you now are going to move to step 2 where you challenge that request. You can challenge the request, or you can challenge that head nod in several different ways, but this is the question that I like the best. The question is, what might get in your way? What might get in your way? So as we're up here, where Joe was just thinking, sure, but your request kind of went in one ear and out the other. Now what's happening in Joe's mind is now the thinking gears had to engage. What might get in my way of shipping that Slinky to Mr. Jones by 2 o'clock today? What might get in my way? And so now Joe is going to start saying things like, well, I have 3 other shipments ahead of that. Or I don't have the FedEx number. Or we don't have a box that size. He might come up with all kinds of different things that really might get in his way. So at this point, what you're doing is you're inviting him into a conversation, which is the beginning of the agreement, inviting him into a conversation about what you need to be done. Step 3 is negotiate. You're going to work back and forth. Hopefully, you can come to some kind of situation where it is, if I, that's you, if I do this for you, Joe, then you will do this for me. That's kind of how a negotiation works. Just work back and forth on that until you come to an agreement. But it's not over yet. You got to go ahead and confirm the agreement. Make sure everybody's on the same page with absolutely what we all agreed to is going to be done. So Joe, you're going to ship that by 2 o'clock tomorrow, and then you're going to send me a text message that it's done. Something like that. You can get creative with that. So definitely make sure that you confirm that agreement. Now here's something that works with human psychology. People up here, when they do a head nod or just the sure kind of thing to your request, they have not given you their word. But when you confirm it and look straight into their eyes, you're asking them for their word. So you can even kind of think in your mind, do I have your word? I have one of my visionaries. He says, that sounds super corny to say, do I have your word? Which is a great opportunity for me to explain that all of this is a creative process. I'm giving you 4 steps to make sure it's easy for you in the beginning, but it's all a very creative process. So he decided that instead of saying, do I have your word, he wanted to look right into the employee's eyes and say, do you have my back on that? And that's just as powerful. So whatever works for you, don't artificially use these words if they don't flow off your tongue. But do make sure it's a nice, creative process. You can do this in a lot of different ways. All right, now let's talk about the hard stuff. What happens when you make this beautiful agreement and you say to Joe, do I have your word? And he says, yes, boss, I've got your back. And now it's tomorrow and the client calls you and the Slinky has not arrived. And you go into Joe's office and here's the Slinky sitting on his desk. He didn't do it. Now what? Well, let me prepare you. When you first start creating agreements, you will be disappointed a little bit because people will break agreements. But at this point, when Joe has disappointed you and he broke the agreement that you have, the way you handle that is you say, Joe, let's go back and examine our agreement. Where did we go wrong? Did we not figure out what was in your way? Is that where we went wrong? Did I fail in the commitments that I made to you? Were we just not clear on our confirmation? So where did we go wrong? And we tackle and examine the agreement instead of the human being. And so if you'll do that over and over again, a couple of times, and hopefully you do have a failure, because it's nice to go back and examine where the agreement went wrong. That's when we really learn when we fail, right? The power of creating agreements will just spread throughout the whole company.